A millionaire meets his ex years later, but the boy beside her has the same look as his. The past returns with tears and a hidden truth. Now, only love can undo the silence of the years. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Encounter. On a stormy afternoon in Miami, when the dark sky seemed to share the weight of his recent decisions, Robert "Rob" Marshall hurriedly got into a taxi on Brickell Avenue. The 38-year-old businessman, heir to one of the largest construction firms in the South, believed he was merely escaping another suffocating day of meetings, divorce proceedings, and unresolved memories. His company, Marshall Enterprises, had just closed a billion-dollar deal to build a luxury resort in Palm Beach. But not even this professional triumph could ease the emptiness he had felt since Patricia, his ex-wife, had decided to leave after 5 years of a marriage that felt more like a business transaction than an emotional union. "To Mercy Hospital, please," he told the driver, running a hand through his hair, still damp from the rain. The taxi pulled away, plunging into the chaotic traffic of the Florida capital. Rob adjusted his navy blue tie, sighing as he thought about the meeting with his cardiologist. Routine exams had revealed a mild arrhythmia, a genetic inheritance that had affected the men of the Marshall family for generations. Nothing serious, according to the doctor, but something that needed to be monitored. It was when the taxi stopped abruptly at a red light that Rob, distracted by messages on his phone, felt a jolt. The back door flew open violently, and a woman rushed in, carrying a frail-looking boy in her arms. "Mercy Hospital, quick! It's an emergency!" she shouted, not noticing Rob's presence. The driver, confused, turned around. "Ma'am, didn't you see the taxi is already—" It was then that their eyes met. Time seemed to hold the world's breath. There, sitting beside him, was Louisa Corday, the woman Rob had loved intensely years ago, and who had disappeared without a trace after a single unforgettable night. But she wasn't alone. In her lap, a sleeping, feverish boy with features that made Rob's heart inexplicably race. "Robert," Louisa murmured, her eyes wide with shock. "Louisa," he whispered as thunder rumbled in the distance. The boy moaned, turning in his mother's lap. His eyes, half closed from the fever, revealed an intense shade of blue, identical to Rob's. The resemblance was so evident, so absolute, that the businessman felt as if the ground beneath his feet had vanished. "What happened to him?" Rob asked, unable to look away from the child. Louisa avoided, his gaze focusing on the boy's fragility, his small body radiating heat and urgency. "That's none of your business," she answered firmly, with a bitterness Rob had never heard in her voice before. "Please, driver, we need to go now." The taxi driver sped up, skillfully cutting through traffic. Rob watched Louisa's profile, so familiar and yet so different. The years had added lines of worry around her eyes, but she still had that determination that had captivated him from the very first moment. "What's his name?" Rob asked after a moment of tense silence. Louisa hesitated, as if weighing whether or not to answer. "Peter," she said finally. "Peter Corday." "How old is he?" Louisa's gaze hardened. 4.5. The timeline in Rob's mind reconstructed itself in an instant. 5 years and 3 months ago. The grand opening party for the Marshall Hotel in Key West. Louisa, then a young journalist covering the event for a news portal. The night they spent together in the presidential suite, days before his arranged marriage to Patricia, the daughter of an influential senator. And Louisa's sudden disappearance the next morning. The taxi stopped in front of the hospital's emergency entrance. Louisa jumped out quickly, carrying Peter in her arms. "Wait, let me help," Rob offered, getting out right behind her. "I don't need your help," she replied, but her legs buckled under the boy's weight. Rob instinctively caught Peter. The boy opened his eyes for a moment, staring at him with that deep blue that seemed a mirror of his own gaze. "Mommy," the boy murmured, his voice weak. "I'm here, my love." "Everything's going to be okay," Louisa answered, regaining her composure. A medical team quickly approached with a gurney. Rob reluctantly handed the boy over, watching as they wheeled him inside. Louisa followed the team, but Rob gently stopped her by the arm. "Louisa, please, I need to know—" "Not now, Robert," she interrupted, her eyes welling up. "My son needs me." "I'll wait," he stated, with a certainty he didn't know he possessed. Inside the hospital, Dr. Edward Vance, a pediatric cardiologist, was examining Peter carefully. Rob watched through the window of the emergency room, unable to move away. "What's wrong with him, doctor?" Louisa asked, her voice trembling with worry. The doctor looked at the preliminary tests with a serious expression. "It appears to be a cardiac arrhythmia. We need to run more tests to confirm, but the symptoms are consistent with Brugada syndrome." Rob felt his own heart skip a beat. Brugada syndrome, the same hereditary condition that had affected the men of the Marshall family for 3 generations. "Is this condition hereditary?" Louisa asked, looking nervously at Rob through the glass. "Yes, it's usually passed down from the father," the doctor replied, following Louisa's gaze to Rob. "Is the boy's father present?" The silence that followed was deafening. Louisa lowered her head as Rob entered the room, moved by a force he couldn't explain. "Dr. Vance," Rob said. "How long—" "Mr. Marshall, what a coincidence. We were just waiting for you for your appointment," the doctor commented, confused by the situation. "This condition," Rob began, looking directly at Louisa. "It's the same one that affects my family for generations." Dr. Vance looked from Rob to the boy on the gurney, noticing for the first time the undeniable resemblance between them. The same blue eyes, the same shape of the face, even the arch of the eyebrows. "I see," the doctor murmured, realizing the complexity of the situation. Peter opened his eyes again, looking confused at the adults around him. "Mummy, who is that man?" he asked in a weak voice. Louisa swallowed hard, the tears finally escaping. "He is—" she began, not knowing how to continue. "I'm a friend of your mum's," Rob intervened gently, approaching the gurney. "My name is Robert." Peter studied Rob's face with childish curiosity. "Your eyes are just like mine," the boy observed, before being overcome by a new wave of weakness. Dr. Vance stepped away to arrange for the necessary tests, leaving Rob and Louisa alone with Peter, who had fallen asleep again. "Why did you never tell me?" Rob asked softly, his voice heavy with restrained emotion. Louisa ran a hand through her son's hair tenderly. "You were about to get married, Robert. You were the heir to an empire. What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to give me a chance to choose," he replied, the hurt evident in every word. "Choose?" Louisa let out a bitter laugh. "Between your arranged marriage to a senator's daughter and a journalist in her early 20s you barely knew? Don't be naive." Rob felt the weight of truth in her words. At that time, the marriage to Patricia meant the merger of 2 empires, the business of the Marshalls and the political power of the Aldridges. It was a perfect arrangement, orchestrated by his father, Anthony Marshall, who had always prioritized business above all else. "I tried to find you," Louisa continued, her voice now almost a whisper, "but I only knew your first name. When I found out who you really were, from the pictures of your wedding in magazines," she paused, swallowing the lump in her throat, "I decided it was better to raise my son alone." The weight of that revelation hit Rob like an avalanche. While he was building empires and living in an unhappy marriage, he had missed the first steps, the first words, the first smiles of his own son. "We need to run more tests," Dr. Vance interrupted, returning to the room. "Peter's heart condition seems more complex than we initially thought." "What does that mean, Doctor?" Louisa asked, fear evident in her voice. "It means we need to monitor him closely and perhaps consider more specific treatments." The doctor looked at Rob meaningfully. "Given the family history, it would be helpful to have detailed medical information about similar conditions in the family." "I'll do everything I can to help," Rob replied, determined. As nurses prepared Peter for more tests, Rob watched his son with a mixture of fascination and guilt. There were so many questions, so many decisions to make, so many lost years to recover. Outside the exam room, his phone vibrated. It was a message from his mother, Carmen Marshall. "Robert, your brother Raphael is furious about the changes you made to the resort contract. He's threatening to legally challenge your position in the company. We need to talk." Rob put the phone away, aware that his world had just been completely transformed. The Marshall Empire, the recent divorce, his ambitious brother. It all suddenly seemed less important in the face of the discovery of that blue-eyed boy who carried his blood. Chapter 2. Secrets Revealed. While Peter underwent a battery of tests at Mercy Hospital, Rob remained in the hallway, unable to leave even if he wanted to. The phone in his pocket vibrated insistently, but for the first time in years, the business of Marshall Enterprises was not his priority. Louisa came out of the exam room with her shoulders slumped, exhaustion evident on her delicate face. "How is he?" Rob asked, approaching cautiously. "Stable for now," she replied, sitting down in one of the waiting room chairs. "Dr. Vance is analyzing the results." A heavy silence settled between them, laden with unasked questions and long-held answers. "Why are you here, Robert?" Louisa finally broke the silence, facing him with a mixture of suspicion and exhaustion. "You have your perfect life, your company, your empire. What do you want from us now?" Rob sat down next to her, maintaining a respectful distance. "My life is far from perfect, Louisa. My marriage ended 3 months ago. Patricia realized what took me 5 years to admit. We married for convenience, not for love." Louisa let out a humorless laugh. "And that's supposed to move me? While you were living your marriage of convenience in your mansion on Star Island, I was working 2 jobs to pay the rent on a small apartment in Little Havana and Peter's medical bills." Her words hit Rob like a punch. The reality he had never considered unfolded before him. While he was accumulating millions, his son and the woman who once meant something special were struggling to survive. "I didn't know. Louisa, you never gave me the chance to know." "And what would you have done, Robert? Abandoned your arranged marriage? Stood up to your father? Given up the presidency of the company your grandfather built?" She shook her head. "We both know the answer." Before Rob could respond, Dr. Vance approached with a file of test results in his hands. His serious expression immediately alerted them both. "The tests have confirmed our initial suspicion. Peter has a variant of Brugada syndrome, which affects the electrical functioning of the heart," the doctor explained. "It's a genetic condition, predominantly passed down from the paternal side." Rob felt the weight of those words. It was the confirmation of what he already suspected. Peter was his son, without a shadow of a doubt. The same condition that affected his father, his grandfather, and himself now manifested in the little boy. "What's the treatment, Doctor?" Louisa asked, holding back tears. Dr. Vance adjusted his glasses. "For now, we'll stabilize him with medication. But I must be honest. In Peter's case, the condition is more aggressive than we normally see. At some point, it's possible he may need a more invasive procedure, perhaps even a heart transplant." Louisa covered her mouth with her hands, stifling a sob. "A transplant, but he's just a child." "We're not at that point yet," the doctor hurried to clarify. "There are other options we can explore first, but it's important that we're prepared for all scenarios." Rob, who had remained silent, stepped forward. "Doctor, whatever treatment is necessary, no matter the cost." "I don't need your money," Louisa interrupted, her voice firm despite the tears now streaming freely. "I've taken care of Peter by myself until now, and I'll continue to do so." Dr. Vance looked from one to the other, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "If I may offer a medical suggestion, this moment calls for cooperation, not conflict. Peter's well-being must be everyone's priority." He paused meaningfully. "Furthermore, given the genetic nature of the condition, it would be extremely helpful to have detailed information about previous cases in the family. And in situations like this, genetic compatibility can be crucial for certain treatments." Rob nodded gravely. "I will provide all of my family's medical records immediately." "Can I see Peter?" Louisa asked, anxious to return to her son's side. "Of course," the doctor replied. "He's been asking for—" "You." Louisa stood up quickly, following Dr. Vance. Rob hesitated, unsure if he should join them. "He also asked about the man with the blue eyes," the doctor added, looking at Rob with a slight smile. "I think he'd like to see you too." In the room, Peter was sitting up in bed, connected to monitors that tracked his heartbeat. Despite his paleness, he seemed more alert than before. His blue eyes lit up when he saw Louisa. "Mommy!" he exclaimed, holding out his arms for a hug that Louisa readily gave. "My little one, how are you feeling?" she asked, smoothing the boy's brown hair. "My heart is quiet now," Peter answered with the simplicity of a child. Then he noticed Rob standing at the door. "Hello, blue-eyed man." The child's spontaneity drew an involuntary smile from Rob. "Hello, Peter. My name is Robert." "Robert," the boy repeated, testing the name. "The nurse lady said they need to take blood from my arm for a test. I don't like needles." Rob approached cautiously, respecting Louisa's space. "You know, Peter, I didn't like needles either when I was your age," he commented, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But I discovered a trick." The boy leaned in, curious. "What trick?" "You close your eyes and imagine you're in your favorite place. Where do you like to go?" Peter thought for a moment. "To South Beach, where Mommy takes me on Sundays for ice cream." Rob smiled, feeling a pang in his chest as he thought of all the beach trips he had missed. "Perfect. So, when the needle comes, you close your eyes and imagine yourself running on the sand at South Beach. It works, I promise." Peter nodded, absorbing the information seriously. Louisa watched the interaction with conflicting emotions etched on her face. "Mommy, can Robert stay here while they take my blood?" Peter asked, surprising both Louisa and Rob. Louisa hesitated, but seeing her son's hopeful expression, she relented. "If that's what you want, my love." While the nurses prepared the equipment for the blood draw, Rob sat beside the bed, telling stories about dolphins he had seen on a trip to the Bahamas. Peter listened, enchanted, almost forgetting the procedure he so feared. When the nurse finally approached with the needle, Peter squeezed his eyes shut. I'm at South Beach, he muttered, holding tightly to Rob's hand with one hand and Louisa's with the other. The procedure was quick and Peter opened his eyes in surprise. "Is it over? I didn't even feel it." Rob winked at him. "I told you it would work." After the blood draw, Dr. Vance informed them that Peter would need to be hospitalized for observation for at least a few days. Louisa arranged to stay at the hospital, while Rob reluctantly agreed to leave to handle pending matters. "I'll be back early tomorrow," he promised, mainly to Peter. "Will you tell me more dolphin stories?" "The Yishi?" boy asked hopefully. "All the ones you want to hear," Rob replied, feeling something melt inside his chest. In the hospital parking lot, Rob finally checked the dozens of missed calls and messages. Most were from Raphael, his older brother, and a few from his mother, Carmen. The situation at the company seemed critical, but for the first time in his adult life, Rob felt there was something far more important than Marshall Enterprises. Driving his Mercedes through the rainy Miami night, Rob didn't head for his penthouse on Star Island. Instead, he stopped in front of a modest apartment, building in Little Havana, an address he had discreetly obtained from Peter's admission form. This was where his son had grown up, far from the privileges that should have been his birthright. The doorman looked at him suspiciously when Rob identified himself, but eventually allowed him to enter after a call to Mrs. Celia, Louisa's neighbor and friend who had a spare key to the apartment. "Is the boy okay?" the gray-haired woman asked, genuine concern in her voice. "He's stable," Rob replied. "Louisa stayed with him at the hospital. I just came to get some clothes and the teddy. Bear he asked for." Mrs. Celia studied him for a long moment. "You're Peter's father, aren't you? You have the same eyes." Rob nodded, feeling simultaneously proud and ashamed to be entering this home for the first time. "Louisa is quite a woman," the elderly lady continued. "Raised that boy all by herself, working day and night. I never saw her complain, not even when the hospital bills piled up or when she had to choose between paying the rent or the boy's medicine." Every word was like a dagger in Rob's chest. While he was enjoying privilege and wealth, Louisa was fighting daily to ensure their survival. The apartment was small but incredibly cozy. Photos of Peter at different ages decorated the walls. His first birthday, his first day of preschool, a day at the beach. An entire life documented, of which Rob was not a part. In the boys' room, a small guitar rested in the corner. Rob recognized it immediately. It was almost identical to the one he'd had as a teenager. Approaching it, he turned the instrument over and felt his heart stop when he saw the initials carved into the wood. R.M. Robert Marshall. "This is," he murmured to himself. "It was the only gift he accepted from you, even without knowing," Mrs. Celia said from the doorway. "It was yours, wasn't it? Louisa said it belonged to the boy's father, that one day she would explain the story. Peter carries that guitar everywhere, even though he can't play it well." Rob ran his fingers over the initials, remembering when he had carved them as a teenager. The guitar had been left in the presidential suite that night with Louisa. She must have taken it as her only memento. Composing himself, Rob collected some clothes for Peter and the worn teddy bear that rested on the bed. Before leaving, he looked again at the photos on the living room wall. Precious moments he could never get back. Back in the car, Rob didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he opened the file that Dr. Vance had given him before he left, Peter's complete medical history. The records told a story of struggle, frequent hospitalizations since infancy, consultations with specialists, expensive medications, hospital debts, loan applications. Rob gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling a growing anger, not at Louisa but at himself, for not being there when he was needed most. Determined to make up for lost time, he picked up the phone and made a call. "Jonas, it's Robert. I need you to investigate something for me," he instructed his trusted assistant. "I want to know everything about Louisa Corday. Professional, financial, medical history. Everything about her and about our son, Peter." Hanging up, Rob took a deep breath. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult. Regaining Louisa's trust, building a relationship with Peter, facing the family complications that would come, none of it would be easy. But for the first time in years, he felt he was fighting for something that truly mattered. Looking at the teddy bear on the passenger seat, Rob silently promised that, from that moment on, Peter would never have to choose between medicine and a roof over his head. And perhaps, with time and patience, Louisa could learn to trust him again. His cell phone rang again. It was Raphael. "Where the hell have you been, Robert?" His older brother's irritated voice came through the speakerphone. "We have a crisis at the company, and you just disappear." "I have a personal matter to attend to, Raphael," Rob answered with a calm that surprised even himself. "More important than the company? Dad would be furious." "Yes, Raphael, much more important than the company," Rob replied, starting the engine. "And as for what Dad would think, maybe it's time we stopped living to please a man who never knew how to show affection to his own children." Before Raphael could respond, Rob hung up and drove to the hotel where he would spend the night, feeling, despite all the emotional turmoil, strangely at peace with his decisions. In the dim light of the hospital room, Louisa watched over Peter's sleep, gently stroking his brown hair. The little boy was finally sleeping peacefully, the heart monitors marking a steady rhythm. "Who is that man, Mommy?" Peter had asked before falling asleep. "Why does he have eyes like mine?" Louisa hadn't answered immediately, searching for the right words. "It's a long story, my love, a story that one day I'll tell you all of." "Is he coming back tomorrow?" the boy insisted, already drowsy. "Yes, he promised, didn't he?" Louisa replied, surprised by her own answer. Something told her that this time Robert Marshall would keep his promises. Chapter 3. Roots and Branches. The sun had not yet risen when Rob parked his car at Mercy Hospital. In his hands he carried a bag with Peter's teddy bear and some clean clothes, as well as a small children's guitar he had bought the night before at a 24-hour store. It wasn't identical to his old instrument, now belonging to his son, but he hoped the boy would like it. At the reception desk, a nurse smiled in recognition. "Good morning, Mr. Marshall. Ms. Corday and little Peter are in room 302. The hallway seemed endless as he walked, his heart pounding with an anxiety he had never felt in billion-dollar negotiations. He paused for a moment in front of the door, taking a deep breath before knocking softly. It was Peter who answered, his voice still sleepy. "You can come in." The boy was sitting up in bed, with fewer tubes and machines than the night before. His face lit up when he saw Rob. "You really came back," he exclaimed with genuine surprise, as if he wasn't used to seeing promises kept. "I promised, didn't I?" Rob replied, entering the room. Louisa was not in sight. "I brought you something." Peter's eyes, so much like his own, sparkled at the sight of the teddy bear. "Peppy!" he shouted, Grabbing the worn stuffed animal with evident relief, Mommy said he was at home, missing me. Rob sat on the edge of the bed, watching as the boy hugged the bear tightly. "And this is for you," he said, handing him the small, colorful guitar. Peter looked at the instrument with wide eyes. "Is it really mine?" "All yours. I noticed you like music." The boy nodded vigorously. "I have a big guitar at home. Mommy said it was my dad's. I always take it with me, but Mommy wouldn't let me bring it to the hospital." Rob felt a lump in his throat. "Can you play anything?" Peter strummed the strings clumsily. "A little bit. Uncle Bernie teaches me sometimes." The mention of an uncle provoked an involuntary reaction in Rob. "Uncle Bernie?" "He's Mommy's boyfriend," Peter explained innocently. "He's a doctor too, just like Dr. Edward. He always comes to visit us and brings ice cream." An unexpected pang of jealousy hit Rob. It was irrational, he knew, but he couldn't help it. "Is he nice to you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Very. He teaches me to play the guitar and takes me fishing at Oleta River State Park. He even took me to see the Miami Heat play once." Every word was like a small jab. Another man had taken on the role that should have been his. The bathroom door opened and Louisa appeared, her damp hair indicating a recent shower. She seemed surprised to see Rob. "You're here early," she commented, adjusting the simple sweater she was wearing. "I promised I'd be back," he replied, standing up. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air, broken only by Peter's clumsy strumming on the new guitar. "Look, Mommy, Robert gave me a real guitar." Louisa smiled faintly, approaching her son. "It's very beautiful. What did you say to Robert?" "Thank you," Peter hurried to say, with a smile that revealed a missing baby tooth. Dr. Vance entered the room carrying a clipboard with test results. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted with a professional smile. "Peter, I see you're feeling better today." "Yes, doctor. My heart is quieter," the boy replied. The doctor gestured for Rob and Louisa to follow him into the hallway. Peter remained entertained, with the new guitar, trying to reproduce notes he had been taught. "The results of the more detailed tests are in," Dr. Vance informed them, lowering his voice. "Peter's condition is, in fact, a rare variant of Brugada syndrome, exactly the same one that affects the Marshall family." Louisa glanced quickly at Rob, who maintained a composed expression, although the confirmation had deeply affected him. "Is there anything we can do?" she asked, her voice tense. "For now, we'll keep him on the medication that stabilized his condition. He's responding well to the treatment, which is a good sign." The doctor paused. "However, considering the progression of the condition, it's likely that at some point he will need a more significant intervention." "What kind of intervention?" Rob pressed. Dr. Vance adjusted his glasses. "There are some less invasive procedures we can try first, like implanting a pacemaker. However, in more complex cases, which this appears to be," he hesitated, "a heart transplant may be necessary." Louisa brought her hands to her mouth, stifling a sob. "But he's just a boy." "It's important that we understand all the possibilities," the doctor hurried to clarify. "We are not at that point yet. For now, I want to keep him hospitalized for a few more days for observation, and then we can discuss a long-term treatment plan." When the doctor walked away, Louisa and Rob remained silent for a moment, both processing the gravity of the situation. "I would like to legally register my paternity," Rob said finally, looking directly at Louisa. She crossed her arms defensively. "Why? After almost 5 years, why now?" "You know why, Louisa. Peter is my son. I want to give him my name, my support, everything he needs and deserves." Rob took a step forward. "And considering his medical condition, he needs access to the best treatments without you having to worry about costs." "I've managed so far, haven't I?" she retorted, lifting her chin proudly. "At what cost?" Rob replied, his voice softening. "You didn't have to go through all this alone." Louisa looked away, unshed tears glistening in her eyes. "It's not that simple, Robert. Your family, your brother, your company. Do you really think they will welcome Peter with open arms?" It was a legitimate question. The Marshall family was traditional and conservative. His father, Anthony, had passed away just 2 years ago, leaving The company presidency to Rob, much to the despair of Raphael, the firstborn. The news of an heir born out of wedlock would certainly cause an uproar. "I don't care what they think," Rob answered firmly. "Peter is my son, my blood. He deserves everything my name can provide, and I—" His voice faltered for a moment. "I want to be a part of his life. Of your lives, if you'll let me." Louisa's cell phone rang, interrupting the moment. She answered quickly. "Bernard?" "Yes, he's better." She glanced briefly at Rob. "No, you don't need to come now. I'll let you know. I love you too." The last words hit Rob like a physical blow. Of course she had moved on. Of course she had found someone who was actually present. The doctor. "Your boyfriend?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Louisa nodded, putting her phone away. "Bernard Montgomery, a neurologist. We met almost 2 years ago when Peter had a more serious crisis." The silence settled between them again, heavier now. "He loves Peter," Louisa continued, looking out the hallway window at the Miami sky that was beginning to brighten. "He's been a good father to him." The word father echoed painfully in Rob's ears. "I understand," he said simply, unable to elaborate further. They returned to the room, where Peter had fallen asleep again, the small guitar still in his arms. Louisa adjusted the covers with a maternal care that broke Rob's heart. "He gets tired easily," she explained in a low voice. "It's always been like this." Rob watched his son sleeping, his messy brown hair falling over his forehead, his long eyelashes resting on cheeks still flushed from the fever. A steely determination grew inside him. He would do anything to ensure that this child had a long and healthy life. "I need to take care of some things at the company," he said finally, "but I'll be back this afternoon. Can I bring you anything?" Louisa hesitated, clearly not used to accepting help. "That's not necessary. Please, Louisa, let me help, even if it's with something small." She sighed, giving in. "Peter likes books about dinosaurs. And maybe a decent coffee would be nice. The one at the hospital is terrible." Rob smiled, grateful for the small concession. "Dinosaur books and real coffee. Consider it done." As he drove to the headquarters of Marshall Enterprises, located in an imposing building in Miami's financial district, Rob made a call to Jonas, his assistant. "Sir, everyone is looking for you," Jonas informed him, concern evident in his voice. "Mr. Raphael is furious about the cancellation of the meeting with the Chinese investors." "Jonas, listen carefully," Rob said, his voice taking on the firm tone of command he rarely used. "I want you to prepare all the necessary documentation for a paternity acknowledgement and schedule a meeting with Mr. Paul Guinness, our family lawyer, for this afternoon." A brief silence followed on the other end of the line. "Paternity acknowledgement, sir?" "Exactly. I have a 4-year-old son, Jonas, and I want everything done with maximum discretion, understood? Not a word to Raphael or any other family member until I'm ready." "Yes, sir," Jonas replied, always professional. "And about the documentation you requested yesterday on Louisa Corday. Bring it to my office immediately." At the company headquarters, the tension was palpable. Employees avoided his gaze, and whispers ceased as he passed. Raphael was waiting for him in his office, his tense posture betraying his irritation. "Finally!" his older brother exclaimed as he entered. Raphael Marshall was almost a harsher version of Rob, with the same family blue eyes but colder, and prematurely graying hair at his temples. "Do you have any idea of the damage you've caused? The Chinese are threatening to pull their investment." Rob sat calmly in his chair, a gesture that only increased Raphael's irritation. "Good morning to you too, brother," he replied calmly. "The Chinese aren't going anywhere. They need us more than we need them." Raphael placed his hands on the desk, leaning forward menacingly. "What is wrong with you? First the changes to the resort contract without consulting me now. This disappearance. Mother is worried." "I have a personal matter to attend to," Rob said, holding his brother's gaze without hesitation. "Something that will change a lot of things around here." "What matter could possibly be more important than the company our father built?" At that moment, Jonas entered discreetly, leaving a file on the desk. "The documentation you requested, Mr. Marshall," he said, before quickly exiting, clearly sensing the tension in the air. Raphael looked at the file curiously. "What is that?" "Nothing that concerns you for now," Rob replied, pulling the file towards him. His older brother narrowed, his eyes suspicious. "We are partners, Robert. Everything in this company concerns me. This isn't about the company, it's personal." "Personal?" Raphael let out a humorless laugh. "Since when do you have a personal life? Dad taught you well. We are Marshall Enterprises, nothing more." The words hit Rob like a slap. It was true. Anthony Marshall had raised his sons to be extensions of the company, not individuals with their own lives. His marriage to Patricia had been a business arrangement. His friendships, business connections, even his hobbies were calculated to benefit the corporate image. But now, Peter changed. Everything. "Things are going to change around here, Raphael," Rob said, standing up, "and I suggest you prepare yourself." Raphael watched his brother with growing suspicion. "What are you planning? Does this have something to do with your divorce? Is Patricia trying to take a bigger piece of the company?" "It has nothing to do with Patricia. In fact," Rob allowed himself a small smile, "it's about a new Marshall." Leaving his brother confused, Rob left the office with the file in his hands. Inside, Jonas had compiled everything on Louisa Corday, a journalism graduate from the University of Miami, currently an assistant editor at a news portal and a writing teacher at a night school. Her financial history revealed a life of constant struggle: loans to cover medical expenses, late rent payments, negotiations of hospital debts. Yet, she had never failed to pay for Peter's private school or his music lessons. Louisa was a warrior, and Rob felt a deep admiration for her grow. The report also mentioned Bernard Montgomery, a respected neurologist at Jackson Memorial Hospital, where Louisa had met him during one of Peter's hospital stays. They had been together for almost 2 years and, according to sources, were discussing marriage. The idea caused an inexplicable discomfort in Rob. He had no right to feel jealous. He was the one who had married someone else, after all. But he couldn't deny the feeling. In the main conference room, where they usually discussed business strategies, Rob was now talking with Mr. Paul Guinness about the procedures for acknowledging paternity. "A DNA test will resolve any doubts," the lawyer explained, adjusting his thin-framed glasses. "But I must warn you, Robert, about the implications. If the boy is indeed your son—" "He is," Rob affirmed with certainty. "The eyes, the heart condition. There's no doubt. Still, we need the formal test," the lawyer insisted. "And if confirmed, he becomes a legitimate heir to the Marshall fortune. This could cause complications with your brother." Rob knew exactly what the lawyer meant. Raphael already resented being passed over for the company presidency, despite being the firstborn. The existence of a new heir, even a child, would be seen as a threat. "I don't care," Rob said firmly. "I want Peter to have everything he's entitled to, and I want to be able to care for him properly, especially considering his health condition." Mr. Guinness made some notes. "And the mother, does she agree to this?" Rob hesitated. "We are negotiating. She's proud, independent. She's raised Peter on her own until now." "I see." The lawyer closed his briefcase. "Well, prepare for a potential battle, Robert. Not just with the boy's mother, but with your own family as well, especially your brother." "I'm ready for it," Rob replied, his determination stronger than ever. Leaving the office, Rob stopped at a bookstore, where he bought not only books about dinosaurs but also about oceans, space, and all the other topics he imagined a curious 4-year-old might enjoy. Then he stopped at an artisanal coffee shop and bought the best coffee he could find. With the gifts in the back seat, he drove back to the hospital, feeling strangely light despite the challenges he knew he would face. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't living just for the company or to meet others' expectations. He was living for something truly important: his son. In the hospital parking lot, his phone rang. It was his mother, Carmen Marshall. "Robert, dear, I'm worried. Raphael said you're acting strangely. Is everything all right?" Rob took a deep breath. His mother had always been more understanding than his father, though equally dedicated to the family business. "Mum, I need to tell you something important. Something that's going to change our lives." Chapter 4. Bonds and Confrontations. Carmen Marshall watched her grandson with tear-filled eyes. Peter slept peacefully in the hospital bed, oblivious to the turmoil his existence had unleashed upon the powerful Marshall family. "He looks just like Robert as a child," she murmured, gently touching the boy's hair. "The same eyes, the same stubborn chin." Louisa stood at a distance, observing the scene with a mixture of apprehension and relief. She hadn't expected the Marshall matriarch to react with such tenderness upon discovering her grandson's existence. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Robert?" Carmen asked, turning to her son who stood beside her. "I've missed 4 years of this boy's life." "I didn't know, Mum," he replied, his voice low so as not to wake Peter. "I only found out 3 days ago when I ran into Louisa by chance." Carmen turned to Louisa, no accusation in her gaze, only genuine curiosity. "And you, my dear, why did you decide to raise this boy alone when he had a family that could have helped you?" Louisa straightened her shoulders, prepared to defend her choices, but something in Carmen's expression, perhaps maternal understanding, disarmed her. "When I found out who Robert really was, he was already married. The ceremony was in all the magazines, the union of the Marshall and Aldridge families." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I didn't want to be the mistress who shows up pregnant to destroy a brand new marriage." Carmen nodded slowly, understanding. "Anthony would have made things difficult," she admitted, referring to her late husband. "He was too traditional. But I would have loved to have met my grandson." Peter stirred in his bed, slowly opening his eyes. He smiled when he saw Robert. "Hi, dinosaur bookman," he mumbled sleepily, before noticing Carmen. "Who's the pretty lady?" Carmen smiled, tears finally streaming down her well-cared-for cheeks. "I'm Carmen, dear, She looked at Robert, unsure. "She's my mother, Peter," Robert explained gently. "She would be your grandmother." Peter's eyes widened with genuine surprise. "My grandmother? I've never had a real grandmother before," he exclaimed, sitting up excitedly in bed. The simplicity of the child's reaction broke the tension in the room. Carmen laughed, wiping away her tears. "Well, now you have one, and I can't wait to get to know you better, my dear." While Peter bombarded Carmen with questions about dinosaurs and whether she could play the guitar, Louisa gestured for Robert to follow her into the hallway. "I didn't expect this," Louisa admitted when they were alone. "Your mother, she's different from what I imagined." "Mom has always been the more human part of the Marshall family," Robert explained. "Dad was the ruthless strategist. She was the heart that held everything together." "Still, this doesn't magically change everything," Louisa crossed, her arms defensive again. "Your brother—" "Raphael is a problem I will handle," Robert interrupted, more serious now. "Louisa, we need to talk about the legal procedures. I want to officially acknowledge my paternity of Peter." Louisa closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. "Bernard is stopping by today," she said finally. "I think we all need to talk." The mention of her boyfriend caused Robert that same pang of irrational jealousy. "Of course," he agreed, keeping his voice neutral. "That's fair." Inside the room, Carmen was telling Peter stories about when Robert was little. "Did you know your father used to play the guitar too? He even wrote beautiful songs when he was a teenager. My father—" Peter looked confused at Carmen, then at the door where Robert and Louisa were talking. His blue eyes widened with sudden understanding. "Is Robert my father?" A heavy silence fell in the room. Louisa and Robert hurried back in, caught off guard by the question they hadn't planned to face so soon. "Peter, Louisa began, approaching her son. "Is it true?" the boy insisted, looking directly at Robert. "Are you my real dad?" Robert exchanged a quick look, with Louisa seeking permission. She nodded slightly, understanding that the moment had come whether they wanted it to or not. "Yes, Peter," Robert answered, approaching the bed. "I am your father." The boy was silent for a long moment, processing the information in the way a 4-year-old could understand. "Is that why we have the same eyes?" he finally asked. "Yes," Robert smiled, relieved by the child's practical approach. "And the same problem with our hearts, too." Peter frowned, thoughtful. "But why did you never come to see me before?" The simple question hit Robert like a punch. How could he explain the complexity of the situation to a child? "I didn't know you existed, Peter," he answered honestly. "If I had known, I would have come to see you every single day." "But now you know," the boy concluded, with the direct logic of children. "Now I know," Robert confirmed, "and I promise I'll always be around if you'll let me." Peter looked at Louisa, as if seeking confirmation. "Is that okay, Mummy?" Louisa swallowed the lump in her throat, fighting back tears. "It's okay, my love." "And Uncle Bernie? Won't he be sad?" The innocent question brought back the complexity of the situation. Louisa sat on the edge of the bed, holding her son's small hand. "Uncle Bernie loves you very much, Peter. Nothing is going to change that." The room door opened at that exact moment, as if summoned by the conversation. Bernard Montgomery was a man of average height, with brown hair slightly graying at the temples and sharp green eyes behind discreet framed glasses. He carried a bouquet of sunflowers and a small wrapped package. His expression changed as he noticed not only Robert's presence but also Carmen's. "I think I've arrived at an important moment," he commented, his voice polite but tense. "Uncle Bernie," Peter exclaimed, oblivious to the tension, "did you know that Robert is my dad?" Bernard glanced at Louisa, who nodded slightly. "Yes, champ, I knew," he replied, approaching to give the sunflowers to Louisa and the package to Peter. "And I brought you something." While Peter unwrapped the gift, a small toy stethoscope, Bernard extended his hand to Robert. "Dr. Bernard Montgomery, I think we have a lot to talk about." Robert shook the offered hand, noting the firmness of the grip. "Robert Marshall, and yes, we do." Carmen, sensing the need for privacy, offered to stay with Peter while the three adults talked. "How about we read one of the new dinosaur books your father brought?" she suggested to her grandson. In the hospital hallway, the air seemed heavy with everything that needed to be said. Bernard was the first to break the silence. "Louisa told me about your encounter. I must admit it's an unexpected situation." "For all of us," Robert agreed. "Bernard has been essential for Peter," Louisa intervened, "for both of us. He's been present at every hospitalization, every crisis." The implication was clear. "Where were you?" Robert took the blow with dignity. "And I'm grateful for that," he answered sincerely. "But I'm here now and I intend to assume my responsibilities." "Responsibilities," Bernard repeated, a faint, ironic smile on his lips. "It's interesting how a child can be reduced to a responsibility." "That's not what I meant," Robert defended himself, feeling attacked. "Peter is my son. I want to be a part of his life." After 4.5 years, Bernard adjusted his glasses calmly. "Forgive me if I seem skeptical, Mr. Marshall, but I'm well acquainted with your family and your methods. I was on the front lines caring for that boy while your company was buying up hospitals and cutting costs on treatments like his." The accusation caught Robert by surprise. "What are you talking about?" "The Marshall network of private hospitals, a subsidiary of your construction firm," Bernard explained. "It cut the pediatric heart transplant program by half last year. I was on the committee that protested it." Robert frowned, genuinely confused. "That was Raphael's decision, not mine. I didn't even know—" "Of course you didn't," Bernard smiled humorlessly. Louisa placed a hand on Bernard's arm, silently asking for restraint. "The important thing now is Peter," she said, turning to Robert. "What exactly are you proposing?" Robert took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "I want to officially acknowledge my paternity, ensure he has access to the best medical treatments available, offer financial support, of course, and—" He paused. "I want time with him, to get to know him, to be a real father, not just a name on a document." Bernard crossed his arms. "And what about your family, your company, your shareholders? How will they react to an unexpected heir?" "My mother already adores him," Robert replied. "As for the rest, they'll Have to adapt. Peter is a marshal, whether they like it or not. It's not that simple, Robert, Louisa intervened. Your brother, Raphael, has a reputation for not being exactly understanding. Louisa's concern was valid. Raphael was known for his ruthless approach in business and in his personal life. I will deal with Raphael, Robert assured her. Peter will be protected, I promise. Words are easy, Bernard commented. Louisa and I were making plans. We were going to get married at the end of the year, move to DC, I have a job offer at a university hospital there, and Louisa could take over the editorship of a major newspaper. The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow, the idea of Peter being taken far away when he had barely found him. Is that still under consideration? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Louisa and Bernard exchanged glances. Everything has changed in the last few days, Louisa replied. We need to reconsider a lot of things. Peter needs stability, Bernard argued. He can't be in the middle of a dispute between adults. I completely agree, Robert said, surprising them both. And that's why I suggest we work together, not as adversaries. Peter's well-being must come first. The conciliatory approach seemed to catch Bernard off guard. He studied Robert for a long moment, as if trying to determine his sincerity. You really do care about the boy, he concluded, not as a question but a statement. More than I can express, Robert confirmed. In 3 days, he has become the center of my world. Louisa watched the interaction between the two men with apprehension and a glimmer of hope. The situation was complicated, but maybe, just maybe, they could find a path that benefited everyone, especially Peter. Robert's phone vibrated with a message. It was from Jonas. Urgent. Raphael has found out about the boy. He is furious. Robert felt a chill run down his spine. His brother was not known for his understanding or patience. I have to go, he said, showing the message to Louisa. Raphael found out about Peter. The immediate concern on her face confirmed that she understood the gravity of the situation. Can he cause trouble? Bernard asked, noticing the shift in the atmosphere. He can try, Robert replied, already heading for the elevator. But I won't let him. I'll be back as soon as I can. Please keep an eye on Peter. At the headquarters of Marshall Enterprises, chaos had erupted. Raphael paced back and forth in the main conference room, where Carmen was trying to calm him down without success. A bastard! The older brother raged, his face red with anger. And you support this, mother? A marshal raised in a slum by some journalist? Raphael, Carmen scolded severely. Peter is my grandson, your nephew, and Louisa is an admirable woman who raised that boy on her own. Admirable? Raphael let out a bitter laugh. An opportunist is what she is. Waited for father to pass away to show up with this supposed heir. Convenient, don't you think? She didn't show up with anyone, Carmen corrected. It was an accidental encounter, and as for martial blood, you just have to look at the boy. He is the spitting image of Robert as a child. DNA can be forged, Raphael insisted stubbornly. I will demand independent tests in labs of our choosing. It was at that moment that Robert entered the room, his expression serious. I see the news travels fast, he commented, facing his brother. Have you lost your mind? Raphael attacked. Immediately. A bastard son now when we're about to close the biggest deal in the company's history? Watch your words, Raphael, Robert warned, his voice dangerously calm. We're talking about my son. Your son? Raphael laughed humorlessly. You didn't even know he existed a week ago. How can you be so sure? Look at him, Carmen intervened. Anyone can see he's a marshal. And what about the heart condition? Robert added. Peter has the same variant of Brugada syndrome that has affected our family for generations. This made Raphael pause momentarily. I'll still demand tests, he insisted, though with less vehemence. And even if he is your son, that doesn't mean he should be entitled to the family inheritance. He is a marshal, Robert declared firmly, and he will have everything he is entitled to by law and by blood. The shareholders won't like this, Raphael threatened. A scandal like this, an illegitimate heir appearing out of nowhere. The shareholders answer to me, Robert cut in. And there is nothing illegitimate about Peter. If there's any illegitimacy here, It's in the way we're conducting certain business for the company. Raphael narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? The cuts. To the pediatric heart transplant program in our hospital network, Robert replied, remembering Bernard's accusation. That was your decision, wasn't it? Raphael adjusted his tie, suddenly on the defensive. A business decision. The program was losing money. A program that could save your own nephew's life, Robert shook his head, disgusted. From now on, I want a complete review of all decisions made without my direct approval. You can't do that, Raphael protested. We have an agreement, a division of responsibilities. An agreement you've broken repeatedly, Robert approached his brother, his voice low but firm. I never cared much, Raphael. You always wanted more power, more control, and I let you have it. But things have changed now. I have a son to protect. The implied threat did not go unnoticed by Raphael, who took a step back. This isn't over, Robert, he warned, heading for the door. Not by a long shot. When Raphael left, Carmen sighed deeply. He's going to cause trouble, she predicted, worried. You know your brother. Let him try, Robert replied, a steely determination in his voice. Peter is under my protection now, and you know as well as I do, Mother, that when a marshal decides to protect something, nothing stands in the way, Carmen completed with a faint, proud smile. You're more like your father than you think, dear. Except, unlike him, you seem to have found something that truly matters to fight for. Robert's phone rang. It was Louisa, her voice tense on the other end of the line. Robert, something strange just happened. A lawyer just showed up in Peter's room, claiming to represent the Marshall family. He wanted to collect samples for a DNA test. Robert felt his blood run cold. Raphael, he muttered. He didn't waste any time. Louisa, don't let anyone near Peter without my express permission. I'm on my way back to the hospital right now. Hanging up, Robert exchanged a worried look with his mother. Raphael is moving faster than we expected, Carmen said, understanding the situation immediately. I need to protect them, Robert replied, already heading for the door. I don't trust what Raphael is capable of. I'm going with you, Carmen decided, grabbing her purse. That boy is my grandson, and no one from my own family is going to threaten him. As they drove hurriedly back to Mercy Hospital, Robert couldn't help but think about how his life had completely changed in just 3 days. Peter had turned his world, his priorities, his values upside down. And for the first time, he felt he was fighting for something that truly mattered. The road ahead would be difficult, he knew. Raphael wouldn't give up easily. The company would face turmoil. His relationship with Louisa and Bernard would be complicated, but at the center of it all was Peter, that little blue-eyed being who, unintentionally, had given him a new purpose. In the passenger seat, Carmen watched her son with a mix of pride and concern. You really care about them, don't you? She asked softly. Not just Peter, but Louisa, too. Robert kept his eyes on the road, but couldn't help a slight smile. I've always cared about Louisa, he admitted. Even without knowing it, I don't think I ever really forgot her. And she has someone now, Carmen stated, not as a question. Yes, Robert replied, the word coming out with more difficulty than he expected. Bernard seems to be a good man. Peter adores him. Carmen gently placed her hand on her son's. Life has strange ways, my dear. Sometimes we lose something precious only to rediscover it when we least expect it. The important thing now is to do what's best for Peter. That's what I intend to do, Robert assured her, speeding towards the hospital where his son was waiting. Chapter 5. Storms and Shelters. The following week brought a routine Rob had never imagined for himself. Mornings began early at Mercy Hospital, where Peter underwent tests and consultations with specialists. Afternoons were divided between the hospital and urgent meetings at the company, where tension with Raphael grew daily, and the nights often ended with him asleep in the armchair in Peter's room, after hours of telling stories or teaching simple chords on the guitar. Peter responded well to the initial treatment. The medication controlled his arrhythmia, and his overall condition gradually improved. Dr. Vance, however, did not hide his long-term concern. The condition is stable for now, but it is progressive, he explained during a meeting with Rob, Louisa, and Bernard. His heart is wearing out faster than we'd like. What are the options? Rob asked, holding Louisa's hand tightly without realizing it. Bernard noticed the gesture but didn't comment. For now, we will continue with medication and constant monitoring, the doctor replied. There are some less invasive procedures we can consider in the coming months. But in the long run, he hesitated, we need to be prepared for the possibility of a transplant. The word hung heavy in the air. Louisa involuntarily squeezed Rob's hand, who returned the gesture. How much time do we have? Bernard asked, his professional voice masking his emotion. It's hard to say. With proper treatment, years. But the condition can deteriorate quickly if there are complications. Dr. Vance adjusted his glasses. The most important thing now is to keep him stable and happy. Stress and anxiety are not good for his condition. While they discussed the next steps of the treatment, Jonas, Rob's assistant, appeared discreetly at the door. Pardon the interruption, Mr. Marshall, but it's urgent. Rob excused himself and followed Jonas into the hallway. What's wrong? Raphael has called an extraordinary board meeting, Jonas informed him, worried. He's trying to question your leadership ability, citing recent emotional decisions and conflicts of interest. He doesn't waste time, Rob muttered, running a hand through his hair. When? In 2 hours, at headquarters, Jonas replied, checking his watch. He managed to gather almost all the board members very quickly. It seems planned. Rob nodded gravely. He knew his brother well. Raphael had probably been building alliances for some time, waiting for the right moment to act. The discovery of Peter had provided the perfect opportunity. Returning to the meeting room, Rob found Louisa alone. The doctor and Bernard had left. Trouble? She asked, noticing his tense expression. Raphael is trying to oust me from the presidency, Rob explained bluntly. He's called an emergency board meeting. Louisa paled. Because of me? Because of Peter? No, Rob was emphatic. It's because of his ambition. Peter is just the excuse he needed. He approached her, holding her hands in his. I want you to know that regardless of what happens with the company, my commitment to Peter will not change. He is my priority now. Louisa studied his face, as if searching for signs of falsehood. You say that now, but when you're about to lose everything your family has built. I won't lose it, Rob interrupted with surprising confidence. Raphael underestimates how much I learned from our father, and more importantly, he underestimates what a man is capable of doing to protect his son. Something in Rob's determination made Louisa reconsider the man before her. He was no longer the charming, carefree young man she had known years ago, nor the cold businessman she had imagined during her lonely pregnancy. I should have looked for you, she admitted softly. I should have given you the chance to decide. Rob smiled faintly. And I should have looked for you when you disappeared. I should have fought for what really mattered, not for what was expected of me. He paused. But we're here now, aren't we? Maybe it's not too late. The moment between them was interrupted by Peter, who entered the room accompanied by Bernard. The boy proudly carried a drawing. Look, Mommy, Uncle Bernie helped me draw our family. The drawing showed stick figures, a woman with long hair, Louisa, a man in a lab coat, Bernard, a boy in the center, Peter, and a taller man with a briefcase, Rob. Beside them, a grey-haired lady was smiling, Carmen. They were all holding hands. It's beautiful, my love, Louisa praised, her voice thick with emotion. Rob crouched down to Peter's level. You're a great artist, champ. I especially like Grandma Carmen. Peter smiled, proud. Uncle Bernie said families can be different, but the important thing is that everyone loves each other. Bernard and Rob exchanged glances. There was a silent truce there, a mutual understanding that, regardless of the complex feelings between the adults, Peter came first. Your Uncle Bernie is very wise, Rob commented sincerely. Louisa watched the interaction with a mix of relief and concern. It was more than she could have hoped for, but there were still so many obstacles ahead. I have to go, Rob announced, standing up. I have an important meeting. Going to defend your throne? Bernard asked, without hostility. This time just a statement of fact. I'm going to defend my son's future, Rob corrected. At Marshall Enterprises, the main conference room was packed. The 11 board members, including Raphael and Carmen, were waiting. The tension was palpable when Rob entered, impeccably dressed in his navy blue suit. "Ladies and gentlemen," he greeted, naturally taking his place at the head of the table. "I understand this meeting was called with some urgency. I'm eager to know the reason." Raphael stood up from the other side of the table, holding a folder. "The reason, brother, is the growing concern over your recent decisions that seem influenced by personal matters to the detriment of the company." Rob remained impassive, though he noticed the curious glances of the board members. "Be more specific, Raphael." Raphael opened the folder with a theatrical flourish. "In the last 2 weeks you have cancelled crucial meetings with investors, delegated important responsibilities to subordinates, and, most alarmingly, ordered a full audit of our hospital network without consulting the board." "All decisions within my prerogative as president," Rob replied calmly. "Decisions that coincide, curiously, with the emergence of a supposed son." Raphael emphasized the word supposed, causing murmurs among the board members. "A son whose mother, incidentally, is a journalist you briefly knew 5 years ago." Carmen shifted in her chair, visibly uncomfortable with her eldest son's tone. "What's your point, Raphael?" Rob asked, still calm. Raphael tossed copies of documents onto the table. "This is my point. A formal request for you to temporarily step down from the presidency due to a conflict of interest until the situation is clarified, including the paternity of this boy." A heavy silence fell over the room. Rob examined the document without haste, aware that all eyes were on him. "Interesting," he commented finally. "I see you've prepared this in advance. Long-term planning was always your strong suit, Raphael." He stood up slowly, placing his hands on the table. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I will not deny that I recently discovered I am the father of a 4-year-old boy. Peter Corday Marshall," he emphasized the last name, "is my son. The DNA test Raphael so desires has already been conducted and has confirmed the obvious. He is a Marshall, with all the rights that name carries." He took the folder that Jonas discreetly handed him. "What Raphael failed to mention is that, while I was investigating my son's situation, I discovered some irregularities in the management of our hospital network," he continued, distributing new documents to the board members. "Irregularities that include the embezzlement of funds from the pediatric heart transplant program to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands." Raphael turned visibly pale. "That's absurd. A desperate attempt to deflect attention." "The documents speak for themselves," Rob interrupted relentlessly. "Our chief auditor has confirmed their authenticity. The signature is yours, Raphael." The board members examined the papers with expressions of shock and disapproval. "Furthermore," Rob continued, "I discovered that Raphael has been secretly negotiating with our Chinese competitors, possibly preparing his exit from the company with privileged information." "This is slander," Raphael exclaimed, his face now red with fury. "I'll sue you." Carmen stood up, effectively silencing both her sons. "As the majority shareholder and the most senior member of this board, I suggest we suspend this meeting until all these allegations are properly investigated," she declared, with an authority that reminded everyone why the Marshall matriarch was so respected. "And I strongly suggest that you two," she looked sternly at her sons, "resolve your differences in private, as a family, not as corporate adversaries." The board members readily agreed, relieved not to have to make an immediate decision amidst such serious accusations. The meeting was officially adjourned, with the promise of an independent investigation into all allegations. In the hallway, away from prying ears, Carmen confronted her sons. "Have you both gone mad?" she hissed, her voice low but filled with disappointment. "Your father built this company from scratch, and you're willing to destroy it over pride and greed." Raphael adjusted his tie, still furious. "He brought a bastard into the family and expects us all to welcome him with open arms, to accept him as a legitimate heir. That bastard, as you so crudely call him, is my son." Robert's voice was dangerously calm. "And yes, he is a legitimate heir of the Marshalls, whether you accept it or not." "And what about your accusations, Robert?" Carmen intervened. "Are they true?" Robert held his mother's gaze without hesitation. "Every word. Jonas found the evidence when we were investigating the hospital network's accounts after I discovered the cuts to the transplant program." Carmen turned to her eldest son, disappointment evident in her eyes. "Raphael, is it true?" Raphael looked away, the obvious answer in his silence. "You need help, son," Carmen said finally. "What your father built was never just about money or power. It was about legacy, about making a difference." "Legacy?" Raphael laughed bitterly. "Dad trained me my whole life to take over the company, then handed everything to Robert on his deathbed." "Because he saw in me what he couldn't see in you," Robert replied. "The ability to put something above profit." Raphael stared at his brother with ill-disguised hatred. "This isn't over," he threatened, walking away. "Not by a long shot." When Raphael left, Carmen held Robert's arm. "Be careful," she warned, concerned. "Your brother is dangerous when he feels cornered." "I know," Robert replied. "That's why I've taken precautions." At the hospital, Louisa was trying to keep Peter entertained with a card game Bernard had brought. The neurologist had left to attend to an emergency, promising to return as soon as possible. "Mommy, when are we going home?" Peter asked, tired of the hospital routine. "Soon, my love," Louisa replied, adjusting her son's pillow. "As soon as Dr. Vance says it's okay." "Is Robert, my dad, going to be able to visit us at home?" The question was innocent but filled with hope. Louisa hesitated, unsure how to answer. Her relationship with Robert was complicated, and there was Bernard to consider. "If you want him to visit, I'm sure he'll be happy to," she finally replied. Peter smiled, satisfied with the answer. His eyes, so identical to Robert's, shone with a joy Louisa hadn't seen in a long time. "I do. He promised to teach me more guitar chords." The door opened, and Robert entered, looking exhausted but relieved. "Speak of the devil," Louisa murmured, smiling faintly. "Dad!" Peter exclaimed, the word still new on his lips but spoken with growing naturalness. "You really came." "I promised, didn't I?" Robert replied, hugging his son. He looked at Louisa over the boy's head. "How is he?" "Better. Dr. Vance said we can go home in 2 days if his tests remain stable." The news brought a genuine smile to Robert's tired face. "That's great." Peter, sensing something different in his father, tilted his head. "You look tired. Did something happen with the uncles at the company?" The boy's perceptiveness surprised Robert. "Just some grown-up problems, champ. Nothing for you to worry about." "Uncle Bernie says that when we have problems, it's good to talk about them," Peter insisted wisely. "He always asks how I'm feeling when my heart gets fluttery." Robert exchanged a look with Louisa, who nodded slightly, encouraging him to be honest, within the limits appropriate for a child. "Well, I had an argument with your Uncle Raphael," Robert explained, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Sometimes brothers disagree about important things." "Like me and Julia at school?" Peter asked, referring to a classmate. "We fought over the last toy dinosaur, but then we made up." Robert laughed, admiring the simplicity of the child's perspective. "Something like that, but a little more complicated. Are you guys going to make up too?" The innocent question caught Robert off guard. His relationship with Raphael had never been close, even in childhood. There had always been competition spurred on by their own father. "I don't know, Peter. I hope so someday." Satisfied with the answer, Peter turned his attention back to the card game, inviting his father to join. Robert readily accepted, grateful for the distraction. As they played, Louisa watched the interaction between father and son, noticing how Peter had already incorporated Robert into his life with the naturalness characteristic of children. For him, there was no contradiction in loving Bernard, who had been present for so long, and at the same time welcoming this new father he had just discovered. When Peter finally fell asleep, exhausted from the busy day, Robert and Louisa went out into the hallway to talk. "How did it go at the company?" she asked, concerned. Robert summarized the events of the meeting, Raphael's attempt to oust him, and the evidence he had found against his brother. "I didn't imagine it would come to this," Louisa commented, visibly disturbed. Raphael has always been ambitious, but I never thought he would divert funds from a program that saves lives. Robert ran a hand through his hair. Especially from a program that could benefit his own nephew. Louisa crossed her arms, as if trying to protect herself from an invisible threat. Do you think he could do something to harm Peter? The question hit Robert deeply. He hadn't considered that possibility until now. No, Raphael may be many things, but I don't believe he would go that far, he replied, though a discomfort lingered. Still, I'm going. To double the security, as a precaution. Bernard returned at that moment, still wearing his hospital coat. How was the emergency? Louisa asked, trying to normalize the atmosphere. Resolved, he replied briefly, sensing the tension in the air. Did something happen? Louisa and Robert exchanged glances, silently deciding to share the situation with Bernard. After all, he was also a part of Peter's life. Raphael is causing trouble, Robert explained, and he might try something else before he gives up. Bernard listened attentively as Robert detailed the situation. When he finished, the doctor adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. Perhaps we should postpone Peter's discharge, he suggested, at least until the situation calms down. No, Louisa disagreed firmly. He spent enough time in this hospital. He needs to go home, back to his routine. Louisa's right, Robert agreed. We can't let Raphael disrupt Peter's life any more than he already has, but we can take extra precautions. After more discussion, they agreed on a plan. Peter would be discharged as scheduled, but Robert would arrange for discreet security at the apartment. Furthermore, Louisa reluctantly agreed to consider a temporary move to a safer location if the situation with Raphael worsened. The next 2 days passed quickly, with preparations for Peter's discharge and frequent visits from Carmen, who insisted on bringing increasingly extravagant gifts for her grandson. Mother, you're going to spoil him rotten, Robert warned, watching his mother unwrap an expensive children's telescope. Carmen dismissed the concern with a wave of her hand. I have 4 years of gifts to make up for, dear. And besides, she lowered her voice, you never know how much time we have. The observation hit Robert deeply. Peter's condition was serious, no matter how much they tried to normalize the situation. On the morning of the discharge, as Peter was excitedly getting dressed with Louisa's help, Robert received a call from Jonas. Sir, I think we have a problem. The assistant's voice was tense. Raphael has emptied his personal account and didn't show up at the company today. No one can locate him. Robert felt a chill run down his spine. Increase security immediately, and send someone to the hospital now, he ordered, hanging up quickly. He entered the room where Peter, already dressed, was proudly showing off his new dinosaur t-shirt to Bernard. We need to go, Robert said, trying to stay calm. There's been a change of plans. We're not going to Louisa's apartment. Why? Louisa asked, immediately alert. Raphael has disappeared, Robert replied in a low voice for the adults to hear. I don't want to take any chances. Bernard's expression hardened with understanding. Where are we going then? He asked, already grabbing Peter's bags. To my family's beach house in the Keys, Robert replied. It's isolated and secure. No one would look for us there. A trip, Peter exclaimed, catching only that part of the conversation. Are we going to see the ocean? We are, champ, Robert confirmed, forcing a smile. That didn't reach his worried eyes. And we can bring your guitar too. As they left the hospital through a discreet exit, escorted by security from Marshall Enterprises, Robert couldn't help but constantly look over his shoulder. In less than 2 weeks, his life had changed completely. He had discovered a son, reconnected with a past love, and was now on the run from his own brother. In the car, with Peter asleep between Louisa and Bernard in the back seat, Robert drove in silence along the coastal highway. The sun was beginning to set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It's strange, Louisa commented, looking out the window. 2 weeks ago, I was just trying to deal with another one of Peter's crises on my own. Now we're on the run with security guards, like in a movie. I'm sorry for getting you all into this, Robert murmured, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. But I promise I will keep you safe. all of you." Bernard, who had been silently watching the ocean, turned to Robert. "You know, when you showed up, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen," he admitted with surprising honesty. "But now I realize you really care about them, and that's all I've ever wanted for Louisa and Peter." The comment took Robert by surprise. It was almost a blessing, coming from the man who had cared for his son when he wasn't there. "Thank you, Bernard," he replied sincerely. "That means a lot." As the car continued along the winding road towards the beach house, Robert's phone rang again. It was Jonas. "Sir, the police just found Raphael's car abandoned near the airport. It seems he's left the country." Robert took a deep breath, a mix of relief and concern washing over him. Raphael had fled, probably with embezzled money, but at least he no longer posed an immediate threat to Peter. "Keep me informed," he instructed, then hung up. The small group continued their journey to the coastal refuge, leaving Miami and its problems behind, at least temporarily. Ahead, the road opened up, lined with palm trees and the silvery shimmer of the sea in the moonlight. Robert didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in his life he felt he was on the right path, protecting what truly mattered. Chapter 6. Hearts in Rhythm. The Marshall family's beach house in the Florida Keys was an elegant three-story structure with wide verandas facing the sea and an extensive tropical garden that discreetly separated it from neighboring properties. Surrounded by high walls and a modern security system, it offered the perfect refuge for their delicate situation. Peter woke up as soon as the car stopped at the property's entrance. His blue eyes sparkled with excitement at the sight of the ocean glistening under the moonlight, visible even from the driveway. "Can we go see the waves now?" he asked, excitedly, completely forgetting his travel fatigue. Louisa smiled, smoothing her son's disheveled hair. "Tomorrow, my love. It's too late now, and you need to rest." Carmen, who had arrived earlier to prepare the house, was waiting for them at the entrance, accompanied by a middle-aged woman with gentle features. "Welcome," the Marshall matriarch exclaimed, opening her arms to receive her grandson, who ran towards her. "This is Mrs. Zulmira, who takes care of the house when we're away. She's prepared a light dinner for you." The interior of the house was spacious and welcoming, decorated with an unpretentious elegance that reflected Carmen's good taste. Family photos adorned the walls, Robert and Raphael as children, moments with the patriarch Anthony, family celebrations over the years. A visual history of the Marshalls that would soon include Peter. After a simple but delicious dinner of fresh fish with vegetables, Peter finally succumbed to exhaustion. Louisa accompanied him to the room Carmen had prepared especially for him, with a small canopy bed, shelves full of children's books and toys, and a perfect view of the sea. "Grandma Carmen made everything so beautiful for you," Louisa commented as she helped her son into his pajamas. Peter looked around, impressed with the room. "It's as big as our whole apartment," he observed with the typical honesty of children. The observation made Louisa's heart ache. It was true. The guest room prepared for her son was nearly the size of the small apartment where they lived in Little Havana. The difference between Robert's world and hers had never been so stark. "Mum, are Dad and Uncle Bernie going to stay here too?" Peter asked, already snuggled under the soft sheets. "Yes, my love. We're all going to stay here for a few days, like a little vacation," Louisa replied, stroking her son's hair. "And then we go back home?" The simple question didn't have a simple answer. What was home now? The small apartment they had left so abruptly? Or was it possible to build a new home with this new and complex family configuration? "We'll see, Peter. Now sleep," Louisa kissed her son's forehead. "Tomorrow we can explore the beach." When Peter finally fell asleep, Louisa went downstairs to find the others on the veranda overlooking the sea. Robert, Bernard, and Carmen were talking in low voices, sharing a bottle of wine. The atmosphere among them was surprisingly cordial, considering the circumstances. "Is he asleep?" Robert asked when he saw her. "Like a log," Louisa replied, accepting the glass of wine Carmen offered her. "Thank you for the room, Carmen. Peter loved it." Carmen smiled with genuine pleasure. "I did the best I could on such short notice. I had some toys and books brought from Miami, but I plan to take you all shopping tomorrow. It's been so many years since this house has had children. Bernard, who had been silent, took a sip of wine before addressing Robert. So what now? What's the plan? It was the question that had been hanging in the air since they had hastily left Miami. Robert placed his glass on the coffee table, his expression serious in the soft light of the lamps. Jonas confirmed that Raphael boarded a flight to Geneva. The FBI has been notified about the embezzlement charges, but until he's formally indicted, he's technically a free man. Do you think he'll come back? Louisa asked, concern evident in her voice. Eventually, Carmen answered for her son. Raphael is too proud to simply disappear, and there's too much money tied up in the company for him to abandon everything. The important thing is that Peter is safe for now, Robert added, and in the meantime we can focus on his treatment. The mention of treatment brought back the reality of Peter's condition. For a few moments, with the hurried escape and arrival at the beach house, they had almost forgotten what had brought them together in the first place. I spoke with Dr. Vance before we left, Bernard informed them, naturally assuming the role of medical expert. He referred Peter's case to a colleague in Miami, but he suggested we consider a consultation at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. There are pediatric cardiology specialists there who could offer more advanced treatment options. Robert nodded thoughtfully. We can arrange that. We have an apartment in Jacksonville, and the company has a jet that could facilitate travel for appointments. Louisa listened to the conversation with a growing sense of displacement. It was surreal to see these two men, one who barely knew her son until 2 weeks ago, and another who had been a constant father figure, discussing Peter's future together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Shouldn't we go back to Miami at some point? She asked, interrupting the flow of conversation. Peter has school, I have work. An awkward silence followed her question. It was Carmen who finally answered, with the delicacy of someone treading on sensitive ground. My dear, I know your life is in Miami, but considering the situation with Raphael and, more importantly, Peter's condition, perhaps it's time to consider some changes. Louisa felt a slight panic rising. Changes? What kind of changes was Carmen suggesting? Robert noticed her discomfort and hurried to clarify. No one is suggesting you abandon your life or your work, Louisa. But maybe we can find an arrangement that facilitates Peter's treatment and at the same time ensures his safety. I can request a transfer to the University Hospital in Jacksonville, Bernard offered, surprising everyone. If we decide it's best for Peter to be treated there, it makes sense for me to move as well. Bernard's offer touched Louisa deeply. Despite the complicated situation with Robert and the sudden appearance of a new family for Peter, he was still willing to accompany them, to be part of this strange family configuration. We would have to talk more about that, she replied, looking meaningfully at Bernard. There was so much to decide, so many lives intertwined now. The conversation continued for a few more hours, discussing options and possibilities. When they finally retired for the night, it was well past midnight. Carmen took the master suite on the 3rd floor, while Louisa stayed in a room near Peter's. Robert and Bernard occupied separate rooms on the 2nd floor. In the silence of her room, Louisa couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing with the dizzying changes of the past few weeks. She got up and walked to the window, watching the silvery ocean under the moonlight. The sea, breeze brought with it the smell of salt and the promise of a new day. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Louisa, Bernard's voice came from the other side. May I come in? She opened the door to find the neurologist still dressed, as if he couldn't sleep either. We need to talk, he said, entering the room and gently closing the door behind him. About us. Louisa sat on the edge of the bed, bracing herself for the conversation she knew was inevitable. I know, she replied simply. Bernard sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. When I met you and Peter 2 years ago, you were just a single mother and her sick son. I fell in love with you as a family. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But now, everything has changed. Peter has a father, a grandmother, a family legacy that I could never offer. Bernard. Louisa tried to interrupt, but he gently raised his hand. Let me finish, please. I need to say this. He took a deep breath. I've watched you and Robert these past few days. There's something between you, something that goes beyond the fact that you have a child together. Maybe it's just shared history, or maybe it's something deeper that never had a chance to blossom. Silent tears began to roll down Louisa's face. "I don't know what I feel, Bernard," she confessed, her voice choked with emotion. "Everything happened so fast. 2 weeks ago we were planning a wedding, a life together, and now we need to be honest with each other," he completed, taking her hands. "You need time to figure out what you really want. And whatever your decision, know that I will always be a part of Peter's life, not as a father, if that's not my role, but always as someone who loves him." Bernard's nobility only made everything more difficult. How could she choose between the man who had been by her side in the toughest moments and the one who, despite his absence, was her son's biological father, and stirred feelings she had tried to bury years ago? "I'm not breaking up with you, Louisa," Bernard clarified, as if reading her mind. "I'm just acknowledging that our relationship needs to be re-evaluated in light of everything that has happened." That night, Bernard returned to his room, leaving Louisa with her tumultuous thoughts. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and filled with confusing dreams. The morning arrived radiant, with the Florida sun shining on the ocean in a spectacle of golden light. Peter was the first to wake up, running excitedly to Louisa's room. "Mum, can we go to the beach?" he asked, jumping on the bed as if he had never been sick a day in his life. Her son's energy was contagious, and Louisa couldn't help but smile, momentarily forgetting the complications of the previous night. "Yes, we can, but first we need to have breakfast and put on sunscreen." In the kitchen, they found Carmen preparing a classic southern breakfast with grits, tropical fruits, and fresh juices. Mrs. Zulmira assisted her, humming an old folk song. "Good morning, my dears," Carmen greeted cheerfully. "The day is perfect for a swim. I've set out some swimsuits we keep here for guests. They should fit you." Robert and Bernard joined them shortly after, both looking as if they had slept little, but making an effort to keep the mood light in front of Peter. The morning at the beach was a moment of truce for everyone. Peter ran along the sand, collected shells and marveled at small crabs, under the watchful eyes of the adults who took turns accompanying him. The child's simple, pure happiness was a reminder of what truly mattered amidst all the conflicts and uncertainties. At one point, while Peter was building a sandcastle with the help of Carmen and Bernard, Robert approached Louisa, who was watching the sea, seated on the sand. "How are you?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Louisa sighed, without taking her eyes off the horizon. "Confused, overwhelmed, grateful, scared," she listed, with a faint, ironic smile. "Take your pick." Robert laughed softly. "Understandable. Your life has been turned upside down in a matter of days." "Our lives," she corrected, finally looking at him. They were silent for a few moments, just watching Peter play in the distance. There was so much unsaid between them, so many unanswered questions. "Bernard is an incredible man," Robert commented finally. "What he's done for Peter all these years. I have no words to express my gratitude." "Yes, he is," Louisa agreed, feeling a pang of guilt. "He was always there when we needed him." "And you too?" Robert hesitated, unsure how to proceed. "Were you really planning to get married?" "We were," Louisa confirmed. "Before you showed up, we had a life planned together. Peter adores him, and he has always treated my son as his own." The pain on Robert's face was evident, but he nodded in understanding. "I'm sorry for complicating everything." Louisa shook her head. "Don't be. Peter deserves to know his biological father, and you've been wonderful with him. But it's complicated," Robert finished. At that moment, Robert's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. "It's Jonas. I need to take this." He walked a few steps away, speaking in a low voice. When he returned, his expression was tense. "What's wrong?" Louisa asked, immediately alert. "Raphael was spotted boarding a flight back to the US, Robert replied, concern evident in his voice. "And there's something else. The investigation into the embezzlement uncovered documents suggesting he may have tampered with test results related to Peter's heart condition at the Marshall Hospital." "What?" Louisa jumped to her feet. "What do you mean?" We're not sure yet, but it seems that when he found out about Peter, he had someone access his medical records, Robert explained. His voice low so Peter wouldn't hear. It might not mean anything, or it could mean that the treatment Peter is receiving is based on manipulated data, Louisa completed, horrified by the possibility. The fear on her face mirrored Robert's. Silently, they both looked at Peter, who was laughing as he tried to stop the waves from destroying his sandcastle. "We need new tests," Louisa declared, determination replacing fear, "at a hospital with no connection whatsoever to the Marshall Network." "I agree," Robert replied, equally resolute, "and we need to do it as quickly as possible." Bernard noticed the tension and approached, leaving Carmen with Peter. "Did something happen?" Robert quickly explained the situation. The neurologist paled. "If this is true, we can't waste any time," he declared, the doctor in him overriding the emotionally involved man. "I know a specialist at a hospital in Jacksonville. She's one of the best pediatric cardiologists in the country and completely outside the Marshall Network's sphere of influence." "We can leave today," Robert suggested. "The company jet is available." "And what about Raphael?" Louisa asked, casting a worried glance at Peter, who remained oblivious to the adult's agitation. "I'll increase security and alert the authorities," Robert assured her. "But our priority now is to ensure Peter gets the correct diagnosis and treatment." The decision was made quickly. They would return to the house, only to pack a few things, and would leave for Jacksonville that afternoon. Carmen would stay in the Keys to coordinate security and act as a contact in case Raphael appeared, while Louisa helped Peter shower and change, explaining in a simplified way that they needed to travel to see another doctor. Robert and Bernard organized the logistical details of the trip. "Do you really think your brother would be capable of deliberately harming a child?" Bernard asked as they waited on the veranda. Robert sighed heavily. "Honestly, no. But Raphael has always been unpredictable when he feels threatened, and right now, Peter represents a direct threat to what he values most, the inheritance and control of the company." "I was just thinking," Bernard hesitated, adjusting his glasses, "how all of this is affecting Peter emotionally. In just a few days, he's gained a father, a grandmother, an uncle who apparently sees him as an enemy, and now he's being shuttled from one place to another without really understanding why." The observation hit Robert deeply. Amidst the concern for Peter's physical safety and medical treatment, they had neglected the emotional impact of so many changes in the life of a child of only 4. "You're right," Robert acknowledged. "We need to consider that as well. Maybe—" he hesitated. "Maybe we should consult a child psychologist in Jacksonville in addition to the cardiologist." Bernard nodded, approving the suggestion. "That would be wise. And Robert," the neurologist extended his hand, "I want you to know that, despite the complicated circumstances between Louisa, you, and me, we are on the same side when it comes to Peter." Robert shook the offered hand, feeling a growing respect for the man who had cared for his son when he couldn't. "Thank you, Bernard. That means a lot." When they left for the Miami airport, where the private jet awaited them, Peter was excited about the idea of flying for the first time. His childish enthusiasm provided a welcome counterpoint to the adult's anxiety. The flight to Jacksonville was smooth, with Peter falling asleep soon after takeoff, exhausted from the day's emotions. Louisa stayed by her son's side while Robert and Bernard occupied seats across the aisle discussing the next steps in low voices. "I spoke with Dr. Cecilia Santos," Bernard informed him. "She'll see us first thing tomorrow morning at the hospital. I've already emailed Peter's medical history, and she's reviewing everything." "Do you trust her?" Robert asked, a father's concern evident in his voice. "Completely. We studied together, and she's an international authority on pediatric heart conditions," Bernard assured him. "If anyone can determine Peter's true state, it's her." Louisa watched the two men talking across the aisle. It was still surreal to see how they, who should have been rivals under normal circumstances, were collaborating for Peter's well-being. In their own ways, they both loved her son, and that created an unlikely but powerful alliance. In Jacksonville, they stayed in a presidential suite at a luxury hotel, chosen for its security and proximity to the hospital. Peter, waking up during the landing, marveled at the lights of the city from above. "It looks so big," he exclaimed. At the hotel, Bernard received a call from Dr. Santos. "What did she say?" Louisa asked as soon as he hung up. "She reviewed the scans we sent and also has some doubts about the results," Bernard replied, confirming their suspicions. "Some inconsistencies in the reports that don't make clinical sense." Robert, who had been pacing nervously around the suite, stopped abruptly. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means we need to do new tests, completely from scratch," Bernard explained. "And depending on the results, Peter's treatment may need to be significantly adjusted." The possibility that his son might be receiving inadequate treatment due to Raphael's deliberate manipulation was almost unbearable for Robert. The anger he felt for his brother reached new heights. "I'll destroy him," he muttered, more to himself than to the others. "If he harmed Peter in any way, I'll make sure he pays for it." Louisa, who had maintained her composure until then, felt tears escape. How could anyone do that? To a child? Bernard approached, putting a protective arm around her shoulders. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Tomorrow we'll have concrete answers." Peter, who was playing with a new stuffed dinosaur that Carmen had insisted on buying before they left, looked at the adults, sensing the tension. "Why is everyone sad?" he asked innocently. Louisa quickly wiped her tears, forcing a smile. "We're not sad, my love. Just a little tired. From the trip." Peter didn't seem convinced. "When I'm sad, Uncle Bernie always says to think of good things," he declared wisely. "Can we think of good things together?" The simplicity of the childish solution broke the tension of the moment. Robert knelt before his son, touched by his sensitivity. "That sounds like a great idea, champ. Why don't you start?" Peter thought for a moment, taking the question seriously. "I'm happy because now I have a dad and a grandma," he declared, looking at Robert with those blue eyes identical to his own. "And because we're going to see a new doctor who will make my heart quieter." The answer, so pure and honest, moved the three adults. For Peter, despite all the complications, the situation was clear. His family had grown, and that was a reason for joy. "Your turn, Dad," Peter said, turning to Robert. "Dad." The word still made Robert's heart leap. At that moment he realized with absolute clarity that nothing, not the company, not the fortune, not the Marshall name, mattered more than being there for this child who looked at him with expectation and unconditional love. "I'm happy because I met you, Peter," Robert replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise that no matter what happens, I will always be by your side." The rest of the evening passed in a lighter mood, with Peter determined to keep everyone focused on good things. They had dinner in the room, watched an animated movie together, and when Peter finally fell asleep, the three adults resumed their discussion of plans for the next day. "Dr. Santos will run a series of comprehensive tests," Bernard explained. "EKG, echocardiogram, cardiac MRI, and controlled stress tests. It will probably take all day." "And how long until we have results?" Robert asked. "Some will be immediate. Others may take a few days," Bernard replied, "but Cecilia promised top priority." Louisa, sitting near the bed where Peter slept, watched her son with a mixture of love and apprehension. "What if—" she hesitated. "What if his condition is worse than we thought?" It was the question no one wanted to ask, but it hung over them all. "Then we'll face it together," Robert answered firmly, approaching to take Louisa's hands in his. "No matter what happens, Peter will have access to the best possible treatment. I have resources and contacts around the world. If we need to go to Europe, anywhere—" "It's not just about money, Robert," Louisa interrupted gently. "It's about time. About how much time—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Bernard intervened, the doctor in him taking over. "Let's take it one step at a time. First the tests, then the correct diagnosis. Then we develop a treatment plan. There's no point in anticipating problems that might not even exist." Bernard's words brought some comfort, though all three knew that Peter's condition, even without any manipulation from Raphael, was already serious on its own. While Robert and Bernard continued, To discuss practical details for the next day, Louisa lay down beside her sleeping son, absorbing the peace that emanated from him. Peter slept soundly, oblivious to the storms gathering around him. His regular breathing and the slight smile that sometimes appeared on his lips were precious reminders of what truly mattered. Later, when everyone had retired, Bernard and Robert to separate rooms, and Louisa with Peter, she couldn't sleep. The anxiety over what the tests would reveal kept her mind on high alert. She got up carefully so as not to wake her son and walked to the suite's panoramic window, looking out at the lights of Jacksonville. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it carefully, finding Robert on the other side. "I can't sleep," he confessed, looking exhausted but alert. "I thought maybe you were awake too." Louisa nodded, gesturing for him to come in, but pointing to the sleeping Peter so they would speak quietly. "I keep wondering if I did the right thing," she murmured, as they both sat on the small sofa near the window. "If I should have looked for you when I found out I was pregnant." Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There's no use thinking about that now, Louisa. The past is unchangeable. What matters is what we do from now on." "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice almost inaudible. "Scared of losing Peter, scared that this whole situation is too much for him, scared of making the wrong choices." Robert took her hands in his, a gesture that was becoming familiar between them. "I'm scared too. I just found my son, and the thought that something could happen to him." His voice broke. "But I know we're not alone in this fight. We have Bernard. We have my mother. We have resources, and most importantly, we have each other." Louisa looked at him, really looked, for the first time in many days. This was no longer the charming, carefree young man she had known years ago, nor the cold businessman she had imagined during her lonely pregnancy. This was a man transformed by the love for a son, a man who, despite all his privileges, was as vulnerable as she was in the face of life's fragility. Without thinking, Louisa leaned in and hugged him. It was not a romantic gesture, but one of solidarity, of mutual recognition that, whatever their complicated personal feelings, they were united by their love for Peter. Robert returned the hug, allowing himself, perhaps for the first time since learning of his son's condition, to show his own vulnerability. "We'll get through this," he whispered against her hair. "All of us. Together." When they separated, there was a new, silent understanding between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was respect, trust, and the promise of an unbreakable alliance for the good of their son. Robert stood up to leave but hesitated at the door. "Tomorrow, I want to be there for all the tests," he declared. "I want Peter to know that his father is by his side every step of the way." Louisa nodded. "He'll like that." When the door closed behind Robert, Louisa returned to bed, lying down beside her son. Tomorrow would bring answers, perhaps difficult, perhaps hopeful, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone in facing the challenges that lay ahead. Chapter 7. The True Legacy. The next morning dawned grey in Jacksonville, with a light rain falling as Robert's car made its way to the hospital. Peter, sitting between Louisa and Bernard, held his stuffed dinosaur tightly, the only visible sign of his anxiety. "The hospital is shaped like a spaceship, did you know?" Bernard commented, trying to distract the boy. "It was designed by a very famous architect." Dr. Cecilia Santos was waiting for them at the reception, a black woman in her 40s with a warm smile and perceptive eyes. "You must be Peter," she said, crouching down to his level. "I'm Dr. Cecilia. Do you like astronauts?" Peter nodded shyly. "Good, because some of the equipment we're going to use today looks like space. Capsules. You'll get to pretend you're an astronaut on a mission." While a nurse prepared Peter, Cecilia led the adults to a meeting room. "Reviewing Peter's previous tests, I found some concerning inconsistencies," she explained. "The described clinical picture doesn't fully match the test results, as if some parameters had been adjusted." "Does that mean the treatment Peter has been receiving?" Louisa began. "May not be the most appropriate for his actual condition," Cecilia completed. "That's why we're redoing all the tests today." The tests took up most of the day. Peter, motivated by the astronaut game, faced everything with surprising courage. Robert made sure to be present for every procedure, holding his son's hand when possible, talking to him through intercoms when necessary. Late in the afternoon, Dr. Santos called Robert and Louisa for a conversation. "I have the preliminary results," she announced, her expression serious but not alarming. "As we suspected, Peter's condition is different from what the previous tests indicated." "Worse?" Louisa asked, unconsciously squeezing Robert's hand. "Actually, a bit better in some respects," Cecilia replied to their surprise. "The Brugada syndrome is present, but the previous tests indicated a much more severe impairment of the myocardium than actually exists." "What does that mean exactly?" Robert asked. "It means that the heart transplant that would have been inevitable according to the previous tests is not at the moment the only option," the doctor explained. "A state-of-the-art pacemaker combined with specific medication can provide a practically normal quality of life for many years." The relief that flooded Robert and Louisa was almost palpable. It wasn't a cure, but the outlook was infinitely better than they had feared. When they left Cecilia's office, Louisa leaned against the wall, her legs suddenly weak. Robert supported her, hugging her without hesitation. "He's going to be okay," he murmured against her hair. "Our son is going to be okay." Bernard found them like that, embracing. His face showed a flash of pain, quickly masked by professional concern. "Peter is awake and asking for you," he informed them. "This is very good news." Peter was drinking orange juice when they entered the room. His eyes studied their faces with surprising insight. "You're not sad anymore," he observed. "Is my heart going to be okay?" Louisa sat on the edge of the bed, holding her son's small hand. "Your heart needs some special care," she explained simply. "Dr. Cecilia is going to put in a little magic device that will help it always beat just right." "Like Iron Man's arc reactor?" Peter asked, his eyes shining. "Something like that," Robert laughed. "And you'll be able to do almost everything other kids do." "Can I play soccer?" It was Bernard who answered. "Maybe not professional soccer, champ, but playing with your friends? At school recess, definitely." The procedure to implant the pacemaker was scheduled for the following week. While Louisa and Dr. Santos discussed details, Robert pulled Bernard aside. "I need to thank you," he said, "not just for being an exceptional doctor, but for being the man who was there for my son when I couldn't be." "I did nothing that anyone who loves Peter wouldn't do," Bernard replied, "and I will continue to do whatever is necessary for his well-being, regardless of what happens between me and Louisa." "Bernard, I would never try to—" "It's not about what you try or don't try," the neurologist interrupted. "It's about what already exists. I've seen how Louisa looks at you. How she's always looked even in the old photos of Peter where you were hastily cut out." Robert frowned, confused. "Peter has pictures of me?" "Louisa used to cut your pictures out of magazines. She kept them in a box she thought I didn't know about. So Peter would know who his father was." He paused. "She never forgot you, Robert." At that moment, Robert received a call confirming that Raphael had personally ordered Peter's test results to be altered to indicate a more severe condition. The anger he felt was almost paralyzing. His own brother had manipulated a child's medical information just to cut him out of the family inheritance. Peter's surgery was a success. The boy recovered with the resilience typical of children, and 3 days later he was already sitting up in bed, drawing enthusiastically. 3 months later, the family's new home on the Upper East Side in New York City was a hub of activity. Peter, fully recovered, played in the garden with his dog Peppy. Louisa worked as an editor for a digital magazine, and Robert split his time between New York and Miami, where the company continued to operate under a new structure. Raphael was a fugitive, but the investigation was progressing. That afternoon, Robert arrived by surprise, bringing flowers for Louisa and Peter, just in time to watch his son's first guitar recital. During dinner after the performance, they finally revealed the surprise, a trip to Disney World and even bigger news. "Your mother and I are getting married, Peter. What do you think about that?" "I knew it," Peter exclaimed with the satisfaction of someone who has solved a great mystery. "Uncle Bernie told me you loved each other. You just didn't know it yet." "So you approve?" Louisa asked. "Of course, now we're a real family." He paused thoughtfully. But Uncle Bernie will still be my uncle, right? Always, Robert assured him. Bernard will always be part of our family. That night, while Peter slept, Robert and Louisa contemplated the future on the balcony. "What do you think your father would say about all this?" Louisa asked. "I think after the initial shock he would see the true legacy in Peter," Robert replied. "A brave, bright child, full of life and potential." "Peter asked for a little brother yesterday," Louisa commented casually. "Did he? And what did you tell him?" "That first we needed to get married. After that, who knows?" In his room, Peter slept, peacefully, his heart aided by the small technological marvel, but driven mainly by the love that surrounded him, the love of a mother who never gave up, a father who found him at the right time, and all those who were now part of his family circle. It was this love, more than any family name or fortune, that was the true legacy Robert Marshall would leave for his son. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert, Louisa, and Peter has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this story of love, family, and overcoming adversity, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day, we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of life. Share with us in the comments what your favorite part of this story was. Until next time.